I'm very excited to be doing this panel together with Anastasia Shegay, who you already met, and Viktoriia Oliinyk, who you are about to meet. So we've had many conversations during in different panels over the years. But I think we haven't really talked all that much about data science as it happens in the consulting companies. We heard about this in the first presentation also, but now we would like to have a panel about it. It's going to be a little bit on the short side, but I hope that you can come to the mingle then and we can have more of a conversation. So as I said, Anastasia Shegay you met, and now also you get to meet Viktoriia Oliinyk, who is also a senior data scientist at QuantumBlack McKinsey, and she works out of London. And Viktoriia, maybe you could start by introducing yourself.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure. Hi, everyone. I'm Viktoriia. I'm a data scientist based in London, as Galina said. I've been with QuantumBlack for the last 3 years. I'm enjoying my work immensely. I really love what I'm doing. I think that QuantumBlack is an amazing place where you can actually, have this very unique combination of technical work and actually, some being exposed to different things, different industries, and making some tangible impact in the real world. And I find it very exciting. And in the last 3 years, I've had the chance to do very different projects for very different industries, and I believe we will talk about it a bit more in detail later. Perhaps a bit about my background. So I've never really planned to become a data scientist, as many of us perhaps can relate to. I've started my education doing a political science degree, actually, but I always enjoyed math and programming, and at some point I actually understood that I didn't have enough math and coding, and I wanted to do more. So I've actually swapped to math department. It was in Moscow and High School of Economics, and I studied applied math and graduated with an applied math education, which was a good thing, I believe. And then I've also studied in Paris, doing some statistical analysis there, and learning a bit more about big data. And yeah, it was a very interesting way how I ended up in London at QuantumBlack. I can speak about how I changed my mind about doing a PhD degree. And we can actually also discuss that during our panel discussion. But eventually, yes, I was planning to do a PhD degree, but decided not to. And now I'm here, and honestly, no regrets so far.
That's fantastic. I'm, that's, so I also have a math degree to start with. So it's, that's one of the many ways that people enter data science. I think people come from math, people come from computer science, so people come from a domain field of some sort. And Anastasia, remind me again which of the fields you were coming from.
Originally from economics, and then I switched to data science.
Yeah, and I actually work with some fantastic economists who kind of were doing a lot of data science, I think, before data science had a name. In fact, I think sometimes it's considered that Halverian, who's Google's chief economist, perhaps gave data science the name. He's my former boss, incidentally. I should put a disclaimer. But let's discuss a little bit about how consulting is different. So we've talked a lot over the years about data science and product companies, but can you talk a little bit about how data science and consulting is different from data science and product? Would one of you like to start? Anastasia?
Yes, I think the biggest difference is that data science needs to solve a challenge or provide some tangible insights for the client. Basically, we work in partnership with our clients, and We solve usually some challenges that they've either tried to solve before and couldn't, or it's or they don't have the capability to solve it, so they bring us on. And so it's very targeted, but it's not something that happens in a vacuum where you just wonder like, oh, this feature would be interesting to add if you're like in a product company, for example, or if you're in academia, you know, oh, this is an interesting question I would like to look into using data science. So all we do has to be connected to tangible results.
Viktoriia?
Totally agree. And perhaps to add a bit more to that, yeah, the pace is so high that you can't really, you know, sometimes experiment enough, or, you know, like you really want to do some cool stuff with this data, but you realize that no, like actually we don't really have time for that. Like we need to deliver. And yeah, exactly. We need to deliver something tangible first, and then we can have some fun if we have time left. So you really need to focus on the impact, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, translate into using the coolest model or the most cutting edge algorithm. Sometimes it's something very, you know, simple and straightforward. Sometimes, you know, just doing some basic histograms of the data and just showing it to the client can really be eye-opening to them. And as a data scientist, you might be like, you know, this is not really data science. I haven't done any cool, you know, neural networks here. Am I actually a scientist? But for the client, it might be super, super valuable. And yeah, so like the technology that you're using doesn't really equal the impact that it can create for the client.
So would you say that the work is basically much more applied in some ways?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Impact first, and then
and then all the, you know, how we call it, all the nice features and you having fun. But to be honest, yeah, at the end of the day, the client would not necessarily care what is under the hood as long as it does the job, right? No one really cares what kind of like a random for what kind of hyperparameter tuning technique you're using for your random forest. If your results, if your predictions are better compared to other, that's exactly what matters. The rest, you know, you can go and tell your fellow data scientists how cool you are using some cool, I don't know, optimization for hyperparameter tuning. But yeah, in the end of the day, no one really cares. As long as it delivers.
So speaking of that sort of, so what does a project look like from start to finish? You know, in your world, at least in you know, in the consulting world, what's kind of like the life cycle of a project, so to speak?
So not every project is the same. Like it's the very infuriating answer, but there are some things you can expect in every project. So every project has a project kickoff where you start with getting to know the team, understanding what is the client a problem we're trying to solve, getting to know each other, and understanding different ways of working, for example. Then we often work in sprints. So right now I'm on a project that is structured in 2-week sprints. So then we have sprint planning sessions, also something that you can expect. You have stand-ups with your team, you have stand-ups with a client, and then there are lots of frequent problem-solving sessions that can happen kind of ad hoc. So
Makes sense. Question to both of you: what's the shortest project you've done?
I have done my shortest has been 4 weeks.
How about you, Viktoriia?
Mine was 6, and it was intense.
What is oh, funny. What's the longest project that you've done?
12 weeks.
25 in India.
How does it feel to be switching from project to project all the time?
I really don't mind it. I actually don't really like super long engagements because I get a little bored. So I do like to switch teams and switch the context quite often. So for me, 10 weeks is quite good. But yeah, because I think otherwise I might get bored.
What about you, Viktoriia?
I really like changing projects, to be honest. So it's always, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's always a gamble a bit, right? Because we have this joke that for every good project you might get 2 hellish projects, but yeah, it's more of a joke. No, I really like that you can change.
But it's interesting because this is somewhat representative. The 1-to-2 ratio is slightly representative, maybe even of product companies, because you launch some experiments and 70% of them failed, which is approximately what you're describing also in many ways. Would you say that there's a kind of a personality thing that happens? Like if that's the thing that you like, it might be fun if you have kind of a, I'm one of the people also who likes to keep my fingers in 10 different pots, That feels like, some people who do better in consulting and other people do better in kind of a more focused work for a longer period of time.
Could be, yeah. I mean, we also do have longer engagements and some people really, really enjoy them. Like you can be on a project for 6 months and then you really develop, get deep into the content and develop really long-term relationships. So I think it's also possible if you would rather not switch context all the time.
Yeah. So we have a few questions, by the way, that are coming in. So how about we pick out of a few of them? So one of them is, what are your thoughts on private consulting rather than through a consulting firm? And I think the question is specifically about data science.
I can answer that from a very personal point of view. So as I mentioned, we work in teams at QB and McKinsey, and this is very important to me to be part of the team. So I personally couldn't do freelance consulting, but I think it might work for other people because I have worked with freelance consultants and private consultants at the client side, but they're quite integrated in the team. So they have this project for a few months. So I think then it might work actually.
Yeah, definitely like working in the team helps you use this power of the collective brain. And sometimes, you just go for a coffee and you're like, actually, I have a question about this NLP problem. And you just bump into someone who happens to be like an expert in NLP or who did their PhD in NLP, and like suddenly you just have someone who would save you 2 days of doing research on your own and would just answer some of your questions in half an hour. And that's amazing. That's amazing. And of course, no, that's not really possible just, doing Googling and asking Stack Overflow all the time as your private consultant. And of course, I believe that the impact of your work is much different. So is it just you doing some feature engineering for a specific model that has already been built? Or are you a part of the team who is actually, doing a great digital transformation for a big client and, that 6 months down the road, they will have completely changed the data infrastructure and you can see your impact and be part of something bigger, and that's exciting too.
And I think this is something that we bring up in almost every career panel, but generally the advice most of us give to people is, if you're junior, you would benefit a lot being part of a bigger team where you would have mentors and where you would have other people. Although I've had this experience also as a senior engineer, just being able to have lunch with somebody and kind of going, this thing, you should look into it. And you go and you're like, that's basically our timeline, like the thing we'll be doing for the next 3 months, right? It was exactly the right thing. And sometimes it just helps having these people around. So I would probably say, do not start out fresh out of school being a consultant, because also in those cases, like you don't yet have this feeling for when the situations are questionable, when somebody asks you for something that cannot be realistically done, for example, but you will feel really stressed out about it, and it will become impossible, and it might become impossible to charge people for it also, which is an entirely different question.
Yeah.
So we have another question here. So how do you handle situations where the customer wants to use specific tools, but you propose a simpler solution, but less fancy, that will bring the customer value?
I mean, I think if they really have a strong preference for a certain tool, would love to hear what the why the reasons basically behind it. And I think if we really believe that, based on our experience and what we've seen, that this is not something suitable or it will be difficult to maintain in the future, I mean, this is a way, of course, do share the expertise with the client. But yeah, it's usually something that they have either thought about before or they would like to think through with us. But you know, if they're committed to something, they have already went with the Azure suite, for example, and the cost of moving the platforms would be very high. Then these are all the considerations you need to think of.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Viktoriia, do you have any notes on that?
Yeah, I actually had, I have an example from my experience with one big banking client where there was a team of data scientists who actually built a really sophisticated clustering algorithm that didn't really perform well. And, you know, we had a very, political diplomatic conversation, and just, you know, trying to understand how we can, you know, manage the situation, because of course, you know, a lot of work went into this big pipeline and it wasn't really performing well, and we knew exactly why, because, you know, it was not the most suitable algorithm, and we actually wanted to offer something better, like exactly the situation described in the question. And through, you know, these conversations, we actually managed to convince them that, you know, the right thing to do was to switch to something simpler and more explainable by design. And it actually performed much better. And, you know, the whole team was kind of impressed by that and they liked it.
And that's not uncommon, that simpler things sometimes do perform better. Exactly. I think the pet peeve of the last 3 or 4 years is that people go into places and somebody in the management wants deep learning because deep learning is cool and they want that thing. Yeah. And a lot of the times you're like, no, that makes no sense. It's either situations where things need to be explainable, or it's just too complicated, too expensive to do this, whereas you can do something with simpler methods. So then the soft skills become really important, probably. But actually, there's one really interesting question now, and this gets to stereotypes about consulting, I think. Does the work of a data scientist involve a lot of deck building, PowerPoint, or is a work product the Jupyter Notebook, for example?
Such a subject.
Oh, we stepped into the minefield. Who wants to take this one?
I can start, and Viktoriia can build on that. So, I mean, we do not build PowerPoints for the sake of PowerPoints. And also, if we don't like, you know, just export to Excel and try to replicate something in Excel, I think you choose a tool that's that can drive the conversation and the progress forward. So if it is a Jupyter Notebook, then you can just show it, and you know, if the client is at a point where they can understand what's happening, then go for it. There are some clients, or not even the clients, but like you just know that this question that you have, there are 3 options, and you would just put it on one page in PowerPoint, and you need to make a decision like, this is our target variable, this is the proposal, and this is the rationale. I mean, I think this is much better communicated using just a simple page than showing some output in the terminal, for example. And same with Excel. If you just want to pivot some tables, that maybe Excel is the better tool for it. I always think that Jupyter Notebook, Python, those are all just tools, just like Excel and PowerPoint are. So you just need to choose the right tool for what you're doing.
I can add also that my experience, I've had experience with McKinsey over the years, and my experience from something that I've done 7 years ago was PowerPoint decks without operational thought behind it. And my experience that in recent years is definitely that like this capacity has been built up, and it's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff that now McKinsey does that I think it used to be a stereotype, maybe with a background, but the situation has really changed very positively. So I'm really impressed by the work that you guys do and by things which are happening over there. I think that's super cool. So we have, it's 6:15 now, but let's take one more question, and then we'll keep moving, and hopefully we can continue maybe if you guys have time in the mingle to have a chit chat. As a data scientist, how does your collaboration with data engineers or machine learning engineers is organized? Viktoriia, do you want to take this one?
Absolutely. So of course, it depends very much on the size of the team, on the scale of the project, on the complexity of the project. Sometimes we have the setups, like short projects, so-called EM+1. So engagement manager, who is kind of managing the relationship with the client and the day-to-day work. And a +1 meaning a data scientist or someone who would actually do both data science and data engineering work. So this is like, very extreme setup. There is another extreme where you would have a big team with several data engineers, several data scientists, perhaps a machine learning engineer, perhaps a UX designer, perhaps a tech delivery person. And that would be a very different setup. And of course, the way that you interact with the data engineers and machine learning engineers would very much depend on where on this continuum you are. And I would say that, let's say a very basic setup where you would have one data engineer and one data scientist. Of course, it's a very, very close collaboration. And our success as the whole project depends very much on the data engineers, and then the data science work is actually built on top of their contributions, and then all the rest, the translators translating our insights of our models, are built on top of the data science work. And data engineers are crucial here. And sometimes I'm saying, at every project we will have this moment of, we messed up the target variable. It happens in every project, right? So it's super important to really, communicate well with each other, data engineers and data scientists and translators and so on, so that nothing is lost in these links. Yeah, sorry. And
just as a note, no, this is very cool. Just as a note, I would like to say to those of you who are looking for jobs is that right now, in many cases, data engineers are more in demand on the market than data scientists. And in many ways, I would say if you're coming from engineering, and especially it is easier to learn some of the skills. You need to be a little bit humble, because some people learn some data engineering and think that they can do data science. That's not the case, but that's not a bad way to enter the market and have really nice jobs. And certainly we need more women in that field. But in the meantime, I was just going to do this. That's why I turned off my background and was hoping Viktoriia could do the same.
Yes.
There. Invisible Women. It's a fantastic book by Caroline Creat Perez. It incidentally exists in Swedish translation. I saw on TV that they had an interview with her and the book was translated. So I can highly recommend it. Exposing data bias in a world designed for men. But in the meantime, I would like to thank you, Viktoriia and Anastasia, for being here, and hope to see you in the mingle. And I'm going to quickly switch to my slides, which I can't find anymore, but you have to wait a second. No, I probably killed my browser. I did.
Thanks a lot for having us, and do reach out with any questions that you have.
Same here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you to you, ladies.